There's a simple white powder that costs exactly $2, and it can permanently destroy the thick, yellow, hazardous fog covering your car's headlights. Not a temporary wax that washes off in the rain. Not a silicone spray that artificially shines the surface for a week. The full, crystal clear effect of a brand new factory headlight. And the foundational science behind this trick has been used by master craftsmen for thousands of years. Within the next few minutes, you're going to learn exactly how to strip years of dead, oxidized plastic off your headlights using a method the modern automotive industry desperately hopes you never discover. If you walk out to your driveway right now and look at the front of your vehicle, there is a very high chance your headlights look cloudy, scratched, and tinted with an ugly yellowish-brown haze. At night, that fog scatters the light from your bulbs, reducing your visibility by up to 80%. It turns a safe night drive into a dangerous gamble. When you take that car to a dealership or a mechanic to fix the problem, they will calmly inform you that the plastic is chemically burnt. They will tell you the only real solution is to replace the entire headlight assembly, and then they will hand you a printed estimate for $800, $1,200, or even $2,000. But that is a fabricated modern lie. The problem of cloudy, degraded transparent materials is not a modern automotive issue. It is an ancient chemical challenge, and ancient people solved it long before the first internal combustion engine was ever built. To understand how you're going to fix your car for $2 today, we have to travel back to the scorching sands of Wadi el-Natron in ancient Egypt, around the year 2000 BC. The ancient Egyptians prized transparent and translucent materials, specifically natural resins like amber, but they faced a frustrating problem. Under the brutal, unrelenting radiation of the Saharan sun, raw amber and natural resins would quickly oxidize. The surface would turn crusty, opaque, and milky yellow. The light could no longer pass through it. Sound familiar? The Egyptians didn't throw these precious stones away. Instead, miners extracted a natural chalky white crystalline deposit from the dry lake beds. They called it natron, a naturally occurring mixture composed heavily of sodium bicarbonate. The Egyptian craftsmen would take a damp cloth, dip it into this crushed white powder, and gently rub the clouded, oxidized surface of the amber. Within minutes, the opaque yellow crust would simply melt away, revealing the brilliant, crystal-clear resin trapped beneath. They didn't know the exact molecular chemistry of what they were doing, but they understood the physical results. This knowledge did not die in the sands of Egypt. It traveled across the ancient world. By the 1st century AD, Roman artisans working in the bustling markets of the capital were using the exact same alkaline powders to polish clouded tortoiseshell and early crude glass. The Romans discovered that if you used a hard abrasive, you would permanently scratch the surface and ruin it. But if you used this specific crystalline powder, it behaved differently. It removed the damage without leaving a single scratch behind. Jump forward to the year 1284, to the damp, secretive island of Murano in the Venetian lagoon. The master glassmakers of Venice were inventing the world's first wearable eyeglasses. Early medieval glass was notoriously cloudy, plagued by microscopic surface imperfections that refracted light in the wrong directions. To achieve true optical clarity, the Venetian guilds required a polishing compound that was aggressive enough to level the glass, but gentle enough to leave a flawless, mirror-like finish. They turned to the same ancient alkaline structures. They used finely crushed mineral powders, suspended in water, to slowly buff the optical lenses until they were perfectly invisible to the naked eye. These civilizations were entirely disconnected by time and geography. Yet the Roman legionnaires, the Egyptian jewelers, and the medieval Venetian craftsmen all independently discovered the exact same chemical mechanism. They all realized that when sunlight and time degrade a transparent surface, you do not throw the item away. You gently lift the dead layer using a specific, self-crushing crystalline powder. But that's only the beginning of the story, because what those ancient craftsmen were doing intuitively, modern science would eventually validate under the microscope. And that is where the timeline becomes even more interesting. If these kinds of forgotten stories matter to you, subscribe and ring the bell, because this is how knowledge like this survives. The journey from ancient Venetian glass to the front of your modern vehicle requires us to look at one of the most important chemical inventions of the 20th century. In 1953, a brilliant chemist named Dr. Hermann Schnell, working at the Bayer laboratories in Germany, invented a true miracle material. He created a transparent polymer that was virtually indestructible and could be molded into any shape. It was lightweight enough to use in many applications and could withstand massive kinetic impacts without shattering. He called it polycarbonate, and within a decade, this new material had changed the world. It was used to make bulletproof windows, astronaut helmets, and the sleek, bubble-like canopies of supersonic fighter jets. Eventually, the automotive industry realized they could use it to replace heavy and fragile glass headlights. But polycarbonate has one fatal flaw that most people never consider. While it is incredibly strong against physical impact, it is deeply vulnerable to ultraviolet radiation. When the invisible UV rays from the sun hit the plastic on the front of your car, they break down the polymer chains at the microscopic level. The plastic literally cooks under the intense sunlight and undergoes a process called photooxidation. The surface degrades into an acidic, porous, dead crust over time. That is the yellow fog you see on old headlights. It is a graveyard of dead plastic molecules clinging to the front of your car. So how do we get rid of it and restore perfect clarity once again? This is where the ancient Egyptian and Venetian science comes back to life in a powerful way. The $2 powder we are talking about is pure sodium bicarbonate, or everyday plain baking soda. To understand why it works so effectively on headlights, you have to understand the brilliant microscopic physics of the powder itself. Sodium bicarbonate is an alkaline crystalline structure with very specific physical properties. When you look at it under an electron microscope, the particles look like sharp, jagged little rocks. When you first rub this powder against the clouded headlight, those jagged edges act as a micro-abrasive. They physically rip the dead, yellow, oxidized plastic off the surface during the cleaning process. But here is the absolute genius of the crystal that makes this method so effective. As you continue to rub, the friction causes the baking soda crystals to shatter and break apart naturally. They undergo a process called friability that makes them extremely useful. The large, sharp crystals crush down into smaller, smoother microscopic particles as you work. The compound automatically transforms from a coarse grinding paste into an ultrafine optical polishing rouge. The powder perfectly adapts to the surface as you continue rubbing it in. It cuts the heavy damage first, and then it polishes the fresh plastic underneath to a glass-like finish. At the exact same time, a powerful chemical reaction is happening between the materials. Remember how the yellow oxidized plastic is highly acidic in nature. Sodium bicarbonate is highly alkaline by comparison and creates a neutralizing effect. As you rub the paste into the lens, the alkaline powder chemically neutralizes the acidic rot. It stops the oxidation process dead in its tracks at the source. At the molecular level, the problem becomes the solution in a beautiful way. The chemical friction literally lifts the dead plastic away from the clear surface. This exact principle was heavily documented in the mid-20th century by various institutions. In the early 1960s, aerospace technicians at military air bases faced a massive problem with their equipment. The polycarbonate canopies on million-dollar fighter jets were getting clouded by UV exposure and high-altitude friction. Before massive defense contractors stepped in to sell expensive aviation polishes, ground crews used mild alkaline abrasive powders. They used water and mild alkaline abrasive powders to buff the canopies back to perfect clarity with great success. The science was undeniable and produced consistent results across many applications. In the 1970s, rural Japanese mechanics working on early acrylic and plastic car components used the exact same method. They kept boxes of cheap baking soda in their garages, specifically for optical clarity restoration. It was a known, documented, and scientifically sound process used by many professionals. You introduce an alkaline, friable crystal to an acidic, oxidized surface, and you let physics do the rest. Nature provided a perfect self-diminishing abrasive that costs pennies to produce and leaves zero toxic residue behind. It was the ultimate engineering shortcut that worked incredibly well. And then someone in a boardroom did the math, and that is when the industry noticed. A $3 permanent solution cannot coexist with a multi-billion-dollar replacement parts industry. Think about that for a moment. By the late 1990s, virtually every major automobile manufacturer on the planet had transitioned from glass headlights to polycarbonate plastic. It was cheaper to produce, lighter for fuel economy, and allowed for aggressive aerodynamic vehicle designs. But the executives knew exactly what UV light would do to that plastic. They knew that within 5 to 7 years, every single car rolling off the assembly line would develop severe yellow oxidation. Today, the automotive aftermarket parts industry generates over $400 billion a year globally. A massive percentage of that revenue relies heavily on predictable wear and tear. When your headlights fog over and your vehicle fails a routine safety inspection, you are trapped in an economic funnel. If you take the car to a dealership, the service advisor will look at the plastic and declare it structurally compromised. They will tell you the seals are failing and the plastic is beyond saving. They will quote you anywhere from $600 to $2,000 for a pair of brand new OEM headlight assemblies. And millions of people, fearing for the safety of their families, driving at night, blindly hand over their credit cards. If you decide to be resourceful and walk into a massive auto parts retail store, you are met with an entire aisle dedicated to headlight restoration kits. These brightly colored boxes cost anywhere from $30 to $50. But if you read the chemical safety data sheets on these commercial kits, you will uncover a quiet, brilliant scam. Most of these expensive retail kits do not use self-diminishing abrasives. Instead, they rely on harsh chemical solvents. When you wipe their proprietary liquid onto your headlight, the solvent literally melts the top layer of the plastic. For about 2 months, the melted plastic settles into a smooth, clear finish. It looks fantastic, but the solvent strips away the plastic's natural density and leaves it completely raw and unprotected against the sun. 3 months later, the UV rays cook that raw plastic, and your headlights fog up twice as dark and twice as thick as before. They don't want to fix your headlights. They want to put your headlights on a subscription plan. They want you buying a $30 kit every single spring, or giving up completely and buying a $1,000 replacement. This oppression doesn't happen in shadowy, smoke-filled rooms. It happens through massive retail markups, proprietary chemical names, and clever marketing that mocks traditional, low-cost solutions as silly internet myths. A massive industry depends on you believing that a cheap household powder cannot possibly outperform a chemically engineered $50 box of industrial solvents. Before I go further, everything I've revealed barely scratches the surface of what has been hidden from you. I spent months collecting survival techniques, DIY methods, and suppressed knowledge that industries buried for decades. All of it is inside the complete forbidden camping vault. It includes the forgotten water purification trick that requires zero filters, the banned 1940s engine cleaning hack, the old farmer's method for rust-proofing metal forever, and the deep woods insect repellent trick the chemical industry tried to erase. 50 survival guides in one vault, zero filler, every page designed for immediate action. The link is in the description right now. If you've watched this far, you already understand more about material degradation than 99% of professionals in the automotive industry. Subscribe and share this with someone who deserves to stop throwing money at a problem that ancient people solved thousands of years ago. Because now it is time to take your vision back. Here's exactly what to do. And it is almost insultingly simple. You need two things. First, go to any grocery store and buy a standard $1 box of pure, unscented baking soda, sodium bicarbonate. Second, grab a fresh lemon or a $1 bottle of basic white vinegar. We use the mild acid from the lemon or vinegar not to polish, but to create a fast chemical lift. When the mild acid meets the alkaline powder, it creates a gentle effervescent fizz that immediately breaks the bond of the acidic oxidation on the plastic. Step 1. Take a wet rag and wipe the loose dirt and grit off your headlight. You do not want heavy road sand scratching the plastic. Step 2. In a small bowl, pour in about 3 tablespoons of the white powder. Cut the lemon in half and squeeze the juice directly into the powder, or pour in a splash of vinegar. It will immediately begin to bubble and hiss. Stir it with your finger until it forms a thick, gritty paste. It should have the exact consistency of toothpaste. Step 3. Take a microfiber cloth, or even just half of the lemon peel itself, dip it heavily into the paste, and press it against the foggy headlight. Begin rubbing in tight, firm, overlapping circular motions. Within the first 30 seconds, you're going to see something deeply satisfying. The stark white paste will suddenly turn the color of dark brown mustard or strong black tea. That is the toxic, dead, UV-cooked plastic melting away from the lens. The jagged edges of the baking soda are ripping the oxidation off, while the chemical fizz lifts it out of the microscopic pores. Keep rubbing for about 3 to 5 minutes per headlight. As you rub, you will feel the grit under your rag slowly disappear. The powder is crushing itself down, transitioning from a heavy cutter to a microscopic polishing rouge. When the surface feels entirely smooth and glass-like, stop. Step 4. Take a clean, wet rag or a bottle of water and heavily rinse the headlight. Wash away all the brown sludge and leftover powder. Dry it with a clean towel. You'll be left with a piece of polycarbonate that looks exactly like it did the day it rolled off the factory floor. Crystal clear. But there is one final, crucial step. You have just exposed perfectly fresh plastic. If you leave it naked, the sun will eventually cook it again. You must replace the UV barrier. Go to any auto store and buy a cheap $3 tin of traditional Carnauba car wax, or a basic UV clear coat spray. Rub a thin layer of the wax over the clear plastic, let it haze over for 5 minutes, and buff it off. Total investment, about $5 and roughly 15 minutes of your afternoon. You have just permanently bypassed a $1,000 dealership repair using middle school chemistry. A mechanic in rural Montana recently tested this exact method on a heavily abused 1997 pickup truck frame. The owner was terrified of hitting deer on the dark mountain roads because his lights were completely dead. The mechanic didn't order new parts. He used baking soda, a splash of vinegar, and elbow grease. Before the treatment, a light meter placed in front of the truck registered a dismal 400 lux of output. 15 minutes later, after the white powder was washed away, that exact same headlight registered over 2,500 lux. The beam threw light hundreds of yards down the road, and it was night and day. And because he sealed it with hard wax, the repair lasted for years. Roman legionnaires knew it, Persian swordsmiths knew it, Japanese craftsmen knew it, and your great-grandparents knew it. A $400 billion industry depends on you never learning those names. They depend on your frustration and your lack of historical awareness. But this knowledge never disappeared. It was simply priced out of your awareness. The physical laws of the universe do not change just because a corporation prints a fancy label on a cardboard box. Chemistry doesn't care about brand strategy. Nature has never charged a licensing fee. You have the power to maintain your own life, your own equipment, and your own safety. using the dirt-cheap materials the Earth already provided. Every share cracks the wall they spent billions building. Every subscription keeps this channel digging deeper into the vaults they thought were sealed forever. The next vault opens soon, and what's inside might be the most quietly suppressed household trick of all.